In this video, we will go on a quest in 5 leagues from the Borderlands. One of my contracts generated a quest, and that quest wants me to find an artifact. That artifact will be very powerful against the abominations that we are hunting. Our enemies will be the Duskling from page 166. A quest is played this way. On page 106, you look at one of the activities that you have to do in order to begin the quest. Each time you complete an activity, you have to roll a d6 to see if you finish the quest or you have to do more activities related to that quest. Now we're gonna roll for the enemies, for the Dustlings that we're gonna fight on page 166. I get a 45, which are Bloodstreak Band, and they have the trait Tough, and they have 2 self bows. Now we roll for the amount of enemies. I get a 5, and the Bloodstreak Band is +3, so I get 8 basic enemies. Now let's see if they have a leader. I roll a 49, and they have a lieutenant. Now we're gonna roll for the settlement events table. I get a 52, and it says that if I gamble on the casino, I can roll twice. Now let's play the upkeep. I have 7 band members, so I have to roll. I get a 1, and because there are 7 members, it's a +1, so I have to spend 2 gold. On our previous adventure, Juvie the follower was hurt and has to spend 6 turns out of play. But because I traveled twice, now it goes down to 4 turns out of play. And because I'm gonna heal him, because I paid the upkeep, it goes down to 3 turns out of play. Still, that is a lot. Meanwhile, I'm gonna play with the other 6 members of the band, including Hope. Hope is a hopeful champion that is following me, and she is gonna fight with us. Now for the activities, I'm gonna pay 2 gold to fix all of the dwarf equipment with was damaged. The next activity is gonna be to meet the locals. I roll a 51 and I get an adventure point. On the connections table, I roll a 5 and I get nothing. Now I'm gonna roll for trading. I roll a 19, which is a fine shield, and I roll a 35, which are spring wind berries. For the quest, we're gonna fight a side battle, and this is the map. I'm gonna place an exploration token, which are this chest, for each of my warband members. I'm gonna place them far from the entry point, and the entry point is on the far left or the top left of the table. The enemies will be on the right side of the table. Now I'm gonna place the tokens, and I'm gonna place a number on those tokens from 1 to 6 because of the random movement of the enemies. You roll a d6 and you move the enemies to that marker. Before we start, we have to roll on the site reactions table, and I always send Crow to do the scouting. I roll a 98, which is a quiet entrance, and after placing all the enemies in step 4, you may take a group of 3 enemies and move them to the center of the table. So here I place the warband members on the entry point, and you can see the 3 group of enemies that I placed on the table, including one in the middle of the table. The ones with the bow are in the back. Now we start playing and let's roll for initiative. As always, the 2 goes into running, the 1 I will assign to Crow, and the rest will go in the slow phase. Crow will move and try to cast a spell. Crow has a spell that is called Waylay. It can be used in side battle, and the patrol does not move this round. When next activated, they will begin moving toward a random exploration marker. I'm gonna throw it on this group right here on the top. I need to roll an 8 or more, and also Crow has a casting of 1. And I roll an 8. I'm gonna place a token to mark them as Waylay. Now it's Running's turn. Running will move 3 inches because there's a -1 movement on the table. And he wants to cast a spell called Barrier in order to prevent this group in the middle to move. The Barrier spell needs a 6 or more, and he has casting 1, so it's a 5 or more, and I roll a 6. Which means that I can put this barrier, which is a fire barrier, over here. And that prevents movement to the bottom of the map. Now it's the enemy's turn to move. They have tough, but they don't have the crawling ability. So they have to move at -1 to a random exploration marker. They're gonna move random, but the group on the top does not move because of the Waylay spell. So I'm gonna roll for the middle group, and I roll a 2. The number 2 is the marker that they're standing on, so I'm gonna roll again, and I get a 6. They move 5 inches, -1 equals 4 inches to the marker on the back of the map. And they will keep on moving until they reach the marker. Now I'm gonna roll for the enemies that have the bow and arrow. I get a 6, which is their marker. I get another 6. And I re-roll until I get a 1, which is this marker over here. Now it's the hero's turn. In the slow phase, they're gonna move south, and they're gonna dash. Now we roll for initiative on the second turn. Again, I'm gonna assign the 2 to Running, and the number 1 I'm gonna assign to Crow. The rest of the warband will go in the slow phase. Crow is gonna move 4 inches, and he's going to try to waylay the group with the bows and arrows so they cannot move this turn. I'm gonna clear this marker. The spell needs an 8 or more. I had casting 1, so it's a 7 or more. And I roll a 7, so we get the spell. This group of enemies will not move this turn. I will move to a random location on the next turn. The other mystic running will move this turn and will try to cast barrier again. The spell needs an 8 or more. With a casting of 1, I have to roll a 7 or more, but I roll a 6 and I do not get the spell. Now it's the enemy's turn. The group with the bows and arrows will not move this turn, and the other group was on its way to token 6, and now we will move them to the token. And the group on top will move to a random token. I roll a 5, which is their token, so I'm gonna roll again, and I get a 2. They're gonna start moving to the middle of the table. That group moves 4 inches. As a reminder, our group has to collect 3 exploration tokens and then they can leave. Now it's the rest of the hero's turn, and they're gonna keep moving and dashing to the token number 1 here. Tortor moves 6 inches, and Titus moves a total of 7 inches. The dwarf moves 6 inches, and Hope moves 5 inches. Now we roll for initiative on the third turn. Again, the number 2 for running, the number 1 for Crow, because no one has more than 1 agility except for running. And they all go, the rest of them go in the slow phase. I want Crow to cast Waylay again, and I need a 6 plus I have 1 for casting. Crow was not able to cast the spell. Now I want running to cast the barrier spell on this group right here, and I roll a 7, so I get the spell with the +1 casting. I'm gonna place the fire barrier here, and now the enemies have to move around the barrier. Now it's the enemy's turn. This group of enemies are going to move to the number 2 exploration marker, which is in the middle of the table, and they're gonna move 4 inches. For the enemies to be aware of the warband, they have to be within 8 inches of the warband. Measuring, they are really close to the heroes, but not quite yet. Now we roll for this group of enemies, and they will go to the token number 3, which is up in the corner on the right hand side. This group was supposed to go through here, but since the barrier is up there, they have to go through the door. This group cannot fire at the warband because they're not within 8 inches and they don't have line of sight. The rest of the warband will keep moving south, trying to reach token number 1. Now on the 4th turn, we roll for initiative. These are very bad dice for initiative, so I will make Crow go first in the quick phase, and the rest of the gang will go after the enemies on the slow phase. Crow will move within 3 inches of the exploration marker, and he will reveal the token. We now roll on the exploration token table. It is a percent. I roll a 22, which is an item. And now we roll on the loot table. We roll a 44, which is an armor. Now we roll for what kind of armor it is, and we roll a 23, which is a fine light armor. Really good. But that doesn't stop there. As part of the quest, I have to roll a d6 to see if that is the item that I am looking for. I have to roll a d6, and if it's equal or below the number of exploration counters that I have discovered, it is the item that I am looking for. I roll a d6 and I roll a 1, which means that that is the item that I'm looking for on the quest. Now it's the enemy's turn. The group in the middle reaches the marker, number 2. The group in the corner finally reaches the exploration marker on the corner. And the group next to the barrier has to go through the door in order to move. I measure and see that the enemies are within 8 inches of the warband, but they don't have line of sight to Crow, so I will continue the game. They remain unaware. Running the Mystic will run away from the enemies, and the rest of the group keeps going south. We are now on the 5th turn, and we roll for initiative. I just roll a 1, and that one I'm gonna assign it to Crow, and the rest of the gang will go in the slow phase. The fire barrier is gone. I'm gonna activate Crow, and Crow is gonna cast a spell called Fog, which creates a fog cloud 3 inches across, and the figures can move into it and through it, but the fog blocks line of sight. It needs 6 or plus to cast, and I have +1 casting. I roll a 9, so he spends the last of the strands, and he places a fog right here. This is the template. This means that the enemies cannot see through the fog and cannot fire ranged weapons through it. Now for the enemies, the middle group, I'm gonna roll to see where they're going next, and I roll a 3, which means that the group will go up to the corner. The next group reaches the middle of the table, and the group that is in the corner is gonna move to number 5, which is the one at the top of the screen. Now it's the turn of the heroes. In the slow phase, they will move to token number 4, which is in the bottom right corner, and running will move to the south. After the movement, I'm gonna measure if they're within 8 inches and line of sight, and they don't have line of sight to the warband. Now we roll for initiative on the next turn. Again, we assign the number 2 to running, the number 1 we assign to Crow, and the rest of the warband will go in the slow phase. Crow will dash to the back, and running will move south. On the enemy's turn, the group at the top of the table will reach the counter. This group will keep moving north. We roll for the group in the middle of the table, and we roll a 3, which means that they will move to the corner. Tortor will move to counter number 4 and try to open the exploration marker. I roll a 28, and it says that it's an item. We roll a 29 on the loot table, and it says that it's a weapon. I roll for what kind of weapon it is. I roll a 27, which is a fine bow and arrow. The rest of the heroes will dash to the middle token. Now we roll initiative for the next turn. First of all, we move the cloud. I will assign the number 1 to running and see if he can protect the heroes. The rest of the warband will go on the slow phase. Running will try to cast the barrier again. And I get a 7, which is successful. The barrier will not prevent the enemies to shoot at the heroes, but at least it will prevent them from moving closer to them. On the enemy's turn, this group is within 8 inches of Titus and they can see him, so this group is now aware. This enemy, using the self bow, is gonna shoot at Titus. They need a 3 or more, and Titus is under cover, but they roll a 6. The enemy manages to beat the armor. The enemy manages to equal Titus' toughness, and now he's wounded and stunned. I'm gonna place 2 markers, 1 for wounded and 1 for stun. The other guy with the self bow needs a 5 or more to hit Titus and rolls a 5. The enemy tries to beat the armor and succeeds. He then tries to beat the toughness and succeeds. My avatar, Titus, is out of the game. The third enemy in the group has no ranged weapons, so he starts moving towards the heroes. The heroes will move to the center marker. Crow moves first, and now the dwarf reaches the marker, number 2, and begins the exploration. I roll an 82, and that is an ambush. In the ambush, you stumble across a foe that was waiting to pounce on somebody. Place 1 enemy melee trooper behind and in contact with the character, and resolve a melee immediately. They count as the attacker. I am now placing the enemy next to the treasure chest, and it will attack the dwarf. The red die is the enemy, the white die is the dwarf. On the first combat exchange, the enemy beats the dwarf. He beats the armor with a 4. The enemy has a +0, +1, and tries to beat the toughness and rolls a 3, which means he has a 4 and beats the dwarf toughness. And the follower is removed from the table. Hope didn't like that, and she reveals that she is also a mystic and is going to cast a spell. Hope wants to cast the summon spell. Hope is gonna summon a creature to help us, and it has to be with 7 or more, but she rolls a 5. Tortor will move closer to the enemy. He moves 4 inches but cannot reach the enemy. Now we roll initiative for the next turn, and I only have 4 heroes. I will assign the number 1 to Tortor, and the rest of the group will go after the enemies. Now Tortor can reach the enemy. Tortor has an ability called Brute Charge, where he can re-roll the dice, all the dice, on the first exchange. Tortor also has a hammer, a warhammer, which will help him +1 to beat the armor. Tortor has a combat of 2, and he gets +2 on the white die, which is 4, which turns it into a 6 and beats the 4 of the enemy. Tortor beats the armor with a 2. Tortor tries to beat the toughness. They have toughness of 4 and cannot be stunned. He gets a 4 and cannot beat the toughness. Tortor re-rolls the dice because of the brute charge but cannot beat the toughness with a 4. On the second exchange, he fights aggressively. Tortor wins the combat. He tries to beat the armor and with a 4, he beats the enemy's armor. He tries to beat the toughness and fails. On the third exchange, they are tied with 6, but Tortor has a +2 and beats the enemy. He gets a 1 to beat the armor, but because he has a Warhammer, he has a +1 and beats the enemy's armor. Tortor finally beats the enemy's toughness with a 6 and kills the enemy. Now it's the enemy's turn, and the barrier goes away. This group of enemies is close to the battle and is now aware, and they're gonna move. They move 4 inches towards the heroes. The enemy group way in the back is not aware, so we roll to see the marker. They roll a 5, that is the marker that they're standing on. So I re-roll and I get a 2. So they move to the middle of the table. I have 3 of the markers, so now the heroes can leave. I have 2 exit points, one in the corner up there on the left, top left corner, and one at the bottom on the right corner. These 2 enemies will fire at Tortor. They will fire with their bows. I'm gonna say that Tortor has cover, so they need a 6+. The lieutenant misses his shot. The other enemy with bows also misses his shot by rolling a 1. So it's now out of ammo. It is now the hero's turn, and all the heroes want to leave. So I will move Crow to the exit. Running the Mystic will also dash to the exit. Hope will move 4 inches and try to cast the summon spell again. The summon spell needs a 7 or more. I roll a 6 and she has +1 casting, so we get the spell. Hope summons the creature and it's a skeleton, and he places the creature in base contact with her. She also spends one of her strands. That spell is not from the witches' school. You're a necromancer! Yes, pray I don't use your friend for protection. The skeleton moves right now, and he moves 6 inches, -1 because of the scenario. He moves 5 inches. We roll full initiative. We have 4 heroes and 1 summon, which are 5 dice. I assign the number 2 to running, and the rest will go on the slow phase. So my strategy right now is to leave the skeleton fighting while the heroes try to leave. Running will move and try to cast a spell. Running is out of strands, but he has 3 congeal strands, and he will use one to cast Barrier. He will try to prevent this large group of enemies to getting closer to the heroes. He is able to cast the Barrier spell and places the barrier. The lieutenant moves to the top of the building and tries to fire at Tortor. Because Tortor is in cover, he needs a 6+. He rolls a 5 and misses. The rest of the enemies move trying to reach the heroes. Now it's the hero's turn, and Tortor will move away from the enemies, dashing 7 inches. The skeleton moves 6 inches in front of the barrier in order to prevent the enemies from reaching the heroes. Hope, the necromancer, will try to cast the shadow spell. Hope needs to roll a 6 or more, and she gets a 7. Plus 1, she gets an 8. Hope will use the spell to move Tortor 4 inches and can move through impassable obstacles and walls. Tortor is moved 4 inches to this location. After the spell, Hope will move 4 inches. Crow dashes and reaches the exit. On the next turn, we roll for initiative and we have 4 models left on the table. I will make running go on the quick phase, and the rest of the heroes will go in the slow phase, including the skeleton. The barrier is gone. Running will dash toward the exit. Tortor will also dash towards the exit. Hope also dashes 5 inches towards the exit. So in this point in the battle, the heroes move equal or faster than the enemies and can reach the exit point before the enemies reach them. That is excluding the skeleton that is fighting in the middle. Even if the enemies kill the skeleton, the heroes manage to escape. We now go to the resolution stage, and I did not get any adventure points from the table in page 187. So now we go to the injury tables. For my avatar, Titus, I roll an 11. That means that my avatar is dead, but I do have a silver leaf, and I'm gonna spend it to reroll that die. On the reroll, I get a 62 on the dice, which is item damage for my hero. For the dwarf follower, I roll and I get a 93, which is knocked out. So he's fine. I was able to complete the objective, so I get to roll on the loot table on page 196. I roll a 72, which is a consumable. I roll 92 and I get 2 torches. Now we roll on the news table and I get a 31. It says that a friend sends you a letter and I get 1 story point. Finally, for the experience points, everyone gets 2 experience points for surviving and then for completing the objective. If you want to help us make more videos, we have a Patreon. The link is in the description. Subscribe for more 5 Leagues from the Borderlands videos.